This happened over the course of about 18 months. At first, I didn't recognize it as a pattern. I just thought I was unlucky. My name is Sarah, and I work in marketing for a mid-sized tech company. Actually, let me rephrase that. I work in marketing and spend half my time doing other people's work while they take credit for it. That's the more accurate description. The coworker in question was named Marcus. He joined the company about 2 years before everything happened. From the moment he arrived, he seemed like exactly what the company was looking for. Confident, well-connected, charismatic, the type of person who could walk into a meeting and make everyone feel like they'd made the right decision hiring him. For the first several months, we got along fine. Friendly, professional, nothing remarkable. Then a project landed on our desks. A major client, one of our largest, wanted a complete rebranding initiative, new visual identity, new messaging strategy, new campaign rollout. It was a significant opportunity, the kind of project that could define your year. Our manager assigned us to work together. She said it would be good experience for both of us. Marcus seemed excited about the collaboration. So was I. We started with meetings, strategy sessions. I mapped out the timeline, the deliverables, the key milestones. Marcus talked about vision and big picture thinking. Both were necessary. Both were good. Then we started the actual work. And that's when things shifted. I created the initial brand strategy document. 70 pages of research, analysis, positioning recommendations, messaging frameworks. I spent 3 weeks on it. I presented the findings to Marcus before we showed the client. He nodded along, made a few minor suggestions, then said he'd handle presenting it to the client. I didn't think much of it at first. Sometimes people have different styles. Maybe he was better at client presentations. Maybe he thought it would be more efficient. I told him to go ahead. During the presentation, he referenced my work extensively. He talked about our research, our findings, our strategy. But when the client asked specific questions about methodology, Marcus deferred. Sarah handled the details. She can walk you through that if you want. Which meant I ended up doing the detailed explanations while Marcus controlled the overall narrative. Afterward, our manager congratulated Marcus. She said his presentation was excellent. He had really brought the strategy to life. I smiled and said I was glad the client responded well. That was my first mistake, not speaking up. Over the next few months, the pattern repeated itself with increasing frequency. I designed the visual identity system. Marcus presented it to the client and received compliments. I wrote the messaging framework. Marcus presented it and got credit. I developed the campaign timeline. Marcus presented it and got recognition. Each time he would mention my contributions in passing, casually, as though I'd done background research while he'd done the actual creative thinking. It became a predictable pattern. I would create, he would present. He would receive credit. I would watch from the side. Looking back, I recognized the exact moment I should have said something. There was a client meeting about halfway through the project. Marcus presented a major campaign concept that I had developed. The entire strategy, the creative direction, the messaging angles, everything. He presented it brilliantly. The client loved it. Afterward, they sent Marcus an email praising his innovative thinking. "You really understand our brand," they wrote. I received no mention. I sat at my desk reading the email and felt something shift. Not anger exactly, more like recognition. I finally understood what was happening. This wasn't oversight. This wasn't Marcus accidentally being unclear about contributions. This was calculated, intentional. And I was letting it happen. That evening, I went home and made a list. Every project, every deliverable, every piece of work I'd created that Marcus had presented. The list was long, longer than I expected. I showed it to my manager the next day. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply laid out the facts. Here's what I created. Here's how it was presented. Here's the recognition Marcus received. My manager listened. She seemed uncomfortable. Then she said something that surprised me. "Marcus is better at client relations. Maybe that's just how you two work best together." That was her solution. Accept the division of labor where I create and he presents. I told her that wasn't acceptable, that client relationships are built on trust, that the client needed to know who actually did the work. She promised to talk to Marcus about better attribution. Nothing changed. Marcus continued presenting. The client continued crediting him. I continued creating in the background. For several more months, I tried the professional approach. Documentation, email trails showing my work, formal attribution in presentations. None of it worked. Marcus simply became more subtle. He would mention my name quickly before diving into his own analysis. He would reference my work as foundational research, while he positioned himself as the strategic mind. The implication was always the same. I handled the grunt work. He handled the thinking. I considered leaving. I updated my resume. I went to interviews. But part of me hated the idea of letting him win, of letting him take credit for my work and then watching me disappear. So I stayed, and I got angry. Quietly, steadily, burning anger. One day something shifted again. The client called. They wanted to discuss campaign refinements, but they specifically asked for me. "We'd like to work with Sarah directly," they said. "She understands our brand better than anyone." For the first time, someone on the client side had noticed. Someone had realized that the person doing the actual thinking was me. I almost couldn't believe it. The meeting was scheduled for the next afternoon, just me and the client stakeholders. Marcus found out about it. He seemed surprised, uncomfortable even. He asked if he should attend. I told him the client had specifically requested to work with me. He didn't push. During the meeting, something remarkable happened. The client started asking me specific questions about strategy, about decision-making, about creative vision. Not just implementation details, the actual thinking. And I answered every question with confidence. Because I had done the thinking. I had made those decisions. I understood that brand better than anyone in the room. By the end of the meeting, the dynamic had completely shifted. The client saw me as the strategic lead, which I was. They spent the next hour telling me how much they valued my contributions, how my insights had elevated their brand, how they wanted to work with me specifically on future projects. It felt surreal, like suddenly being seen after months of invisibility. When I returned to the office, Marcus was waiting. He seemed agitated. He asked how the meeting went. I told him it went well. The client wanted to move forward with some of my recommendations. He looked frustrated. Then he said something that shocked me. "You know, presenting is important in this business. You can't just hide behind your work." The irony was so thick I almost laughed. He was criticizing me for not being visible while simultaneously taking credit for visibility he hadn't earned. I didn't respond. I simply walked away. Over the next few weeks, the situation became increasingly difficult. Marcus felt threatened. That much was obvious. He started being territorial about client access. He scheduled meetings without telling me. He positioned himself between me and the client. He made subtle comments in group settings about how I needed to be more strategic and stop getting bogged down in details. But the damage was already done. The client knew. They had worked with me directly. They had seen exactly what I brought to the table, and they wanted more of it. They started requesting me for new projects. Just me, no Marcus. Internally, things became tense. Marcus complained to management that I was being territorial, that I wasn't collaborative, that I was trying to monopolize the client relationship. Our manager seemed torn. She knew Marcus was exaggerating, but she also knew that Marcus was better at office politics, better at being agreeable, better at making people comfortable. I was just better at the actual work. Eventually, the company had to make a choice. And to my surprise, they chose correctly. Not because they suddenly appreciated me more, but because the client made it clear. They wanted me leading the account. If that wasn't possible, they would take their business elsewhere. Marcus was reassigned to different projects. I was made the lead account manager for this client. The irony of finally being recognized was bittersweet. It shouldn't have required the client to intervene. My own company should have noticed. But they didn't. Not until an external force made it impossible to ignore. A few months later, I was offered a promotion, better title, better pay, the opportunity to build my own team. I accepted. Marcus was not happy. According to office gossip, he felt I had thrown him under the bus, that I had unfairly positioned myself as the sole creative force. The same way I felt for 18 months. But the difference was important. I didn't throw him under the bus. I simply stopped covering for him. I stopped letting him hide behind my work. I started being visible, speaking up, taking credit for what I created. It shouldn't have required a confrontation, but sometimes it does. Sometimes you have to become difficult before people take you seriously. Eventually, Marcus left the company. I'm not sure if he left because of me. He told people he wanted new opportunities. Maybe he did. Or maybe he couldn't handle being in an environment where his contributions were finally being accurately assessed. Either way, he's gone now. And I'm leading a growing team. We do excellent work. The clients recognize it. The company recognizes it. Most importantly, I recognize it. Years later, thinking back on that experience, I've learned several important things. First, visibility is not vanity. Being seen for your work is fundamental to being valued. It's not enough to be good. People need to know you're good. Second, there will always be Marcus. People who understand that credit matters more than truth. People who will present your work as theirs without hesitation. People who believe confidence is more important than competence. They exist everywhere, and you cannot change them. You can only choose not to enable them. Third, speaking up early is crucial. I waited too long. I gave Marcus months to establish a narrative before I challenged it. By that time, the story was already told. If I had been more vocal earlier, things might have been different. Fourth, your work should speak for itself, but it won't, not completely. Your work will be stolen, taken for granted, overlooked, unless you make sure people know what you did and why it mattered. Finally, sometimes justice arrives not because you demanded it, but because someone else recognized the truth. The client saw my work directly. They saw the gap between my contributions and the credit I received, and they refused to let it continue. That's what finally changed things. Not my manager, not HR, not office politics. Just a client who respected excellent work enough to insist on working with the person who created it. Looking back, I'm grateful for that client. Because they did what my company should have done. They saw me. And they made sure everyone else did too.